Welcome to the Ute Pass flood meeting that we're holding tonight. Thank you for coming out. I'm glad that it's nice weather, at least for a change for a while. And we had a beautiful evening tonight. I'm County Commissioner Sally Clark, and this is my commissioner district. And we're here tonight to update all of you on the different projects that are going on in the area. The Colorado Department of Transportation will be talking about their closure procedures along Highway 24. You're going to hear a little bit about some of the mitigation projects and emergency preparedness. I know this has been kind of a difficult week or so of lots of water and lots of, whether you had snow or hail or rain, it's been difficult. In fact, my basement was flooded too, and I live in the city of Colorado Springs. So I know that it's been kind of stressful, but we want to prepare everybody for our spring continual rainy season, and so this is our opportunity to do that. I wanted to just introduce, we have a few elected officials here tonight, and I want to thank them for being here. We have Norm Steen from Teller County, County Commissioner. There's Norm. Thanks for being here. Mayor Mark Snyder from the city of Manitou Springs, our partners down here to the east. And Mayor Lori Worthy is back there from the town of Green Mountain Falls. Any other elected officials that I missed, thank you for being here if I didn't introduce you. In addition, I was supposed to introduce Fire Chief Steve Murphy, but apparently he's out doing his job. He got out on a call, and he's not here tonight, but he certainly, I know, has been following what's been going on very closely up here in the Ute Pass area. Is Fire Chief Eric Ide here? Thank you for being here, Eric. Appreciate that, from Cascade Fire. We have Larry Small, who is the Fountain Creek Watershed Flood Control and Greenway District Director. And we have some displays back there that you're welcome to take a look at on all the many projects on the Fountain Creek that are being looked at and prioritized as to other important projects that are not necessarily all directly Waldo Canyon related. Then we also have Paul Eller from Homeland Security, the South Central region. Paul, where are you? I know you're there at the back of the wall there. And is Chris Briggs-Hale here, our principal? Well, the school has been tremendous in giving us support to hold these meetings, so we really do appreciate our principal's help in getting the facility here for us to hold these meetings tonight. And then I'm not sure, as a lot of these folks will come up and we'll introduce them, they're going to give some presentations on the various, again, flood projects. So a little bit about the agenda tonight, and I'm just going to go over that with you. We will have R.C. Smith, who's our El Paso County Recovery Manager, talk about mitigation and recovery updates. We will have Tom Magnuson from the National Weather Service here talk about the local flood forecasting and alert system. And then we're going to have Sergeant Jones from the Colorado State Patrol talk about driving and safety issues along Highway 24. Then we'll have Robin Adair come back and give us an update on flood preparedness resources. And in between there, we also have Kenny Quintana from the Colorado Department of Transportation to talk about the Highway 24 traffic plan. So that's kind of the rundown tonight, and then we'll have a few minutes, about a half an hour for Q&A. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce R.C. Smith, who's our recovery manager for El Paso County.
Hi everybody, obviously Commissioner Clark introduced me. I'm R.C. Smith, work for El Paso County. What I got here is I dug out a little definition of mitigation today. And this definition says it's sustained action taken to reduce or eliminate long-term risk to human life and property from natural and human-caused disasters. So that's what we try to do. Sorry, I didn't mean to cough in the mic. But I like to walk around a little bit. So what we're trying to do, and there's maps back here that we have and different projects that we can show you to where the county's doing mitigation, CDOT's doing mitigation. We've got a lot of partners working on this. So what our projects are trying to do is reduce some of what's happened with the post-fire flooding. And even with all the rain that we've had, a lot of it's working really well. If you look at the big catchment sediment basin that's above Waldo Canyon, if you look at the huge culvert that CDOT put under 24 at Waldo Canyon, all that worked. I mean, we had a lot of rain. Tom Magnuson's here from a weather service. He'll tell you about it. Now, we haven't had some of the intense storms that we've had in the past, but we've had a ton of rain. And if you look at the water, even the water that's running off the Cascade Channel, it carried that sediment out. CDOT put a notch in it to where it could drop on that water could drop on the side of the highway there, but that water is pretty much clear. And the sediment in the water is what tears stuff up. So kind of my part here is to, again, give credit to our partners in CDOT and the other departments that help us in the county. And then kind of the general gist of the meeting is if you have the imminent emergency, we'll be providing information what to do in a flash flood. The State Patrol's here to tell you about what to do about not driving into flood water, because we see a lot of that. And I think there's some pictures here of a truck caught in a lot of sediment. So if you kind of see that sediment coming, you want to be going the other way. Or at least you want to stay in your vehicle, because you got to have a lot better chance surviving that way. But the other message from El Paso County and the Office of Emergency Management is to think about what you would do not only in the imminent emergency, you kind of have to plan for that, obviously, that's the most life-threatening, but also in the more mundane parts of it. What if the highway's closed? You know, you commute to the Springs, whether it's to work or to shop, your children are up here in school, and the highway's closed. That can create a huge problem for people. But you can lessen that if you plan ahead and think about, where would I want my children to go? What would I want them to do? That type of thing. So, our tagline is to don't be scared, be prepared, be ready for whatever may happen, and we'll try to do our part to lessen what can happen. But what I want to say with that is mitigation is not eliminating the risk. It's trying to minimize some of the damage from the risk, but it certainly doesn't eliminate it. And we're going to be dealing with this at this rate probably for about the next 5 to 8 years, because it's going to take the forest that long to regenerate and get some of that ground cover back to hold that water up on the hillside. So with that, I'll kick it off. And who's our next presenter? Commissioner? Now we're turning it over to the guy that you can blame all this on, the weatherman.
That was a fantastic introduction. I guess what I need is somebody to help me with the computer there, just to fire it up and get my PowerPoint up. But just as an aside, just to give you a little introduction here, my name is Tom Magnus. I'm the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Pueblo. And I've been the, I guess you could say, the public liaison there for the last 21 years. So I know a thing or two about Colorado weather, but still some things do surprise me from time to time. And now we've been dealing with the Waldo Canyon burn scar for now coming on since 2012. So it looks like we are going to see some issues for the next, as RC said, for the next 5 to 8 years. So I'm gonna back out of this here and go back to the beginning, because that's actually my last slide. So we'll go to the beginning, and I've entitled my presentation "Fire and Rain." Okay, and that's what we've had. We've had, of course, the big fire, and now we're dealing with the rains across the area. And we've learned a lot of things about the Waldo Canyon burn scar in the last 3 years, just dealing it from a weather perspective. One of the things, it's a very complex situation, as you might imagine. We've got lots of watersheds, what we call, on the burn scar. They're all different sizes. They have all different, slopes to them. Each one reacts differently when it rains hard. And this is just an example of one of the showers and thunderstorm activity that came over the burn scar early on in 2013 and raced across the burn scar, hit just a couple of watersheds, and caused some serious flooding across Waldo and Williams Canyon. On August 9th, that's been our worst incursion of water on, of course, US 24. And we've been tracking this very closely from season to season. Just to give you an example here, the Waldo Canyon rain on that particular day, we had 1.5 inches of rain with rainfall rates of about 2 to 3 inches an hour. So that means we had a 1/2 inch of rain in about 30 minutes. So it's like dumping a bucket of water on the mountainside, just thousands and thousands of buckets of water, and then it just comes rushing down really fast. On the Williams Canyon, on that particular storm, we had about 1.5 inches of rain, but that fell in 20 minutes, so it was even faster. So that's why we had all the issues in Manitou Springs with the flooding and the devastating flooding in Manitou. Of course, everybody's seen this video before, August 9th, and that was before the huge culvert was put in under US 24 at Waldo Canyon, which seems to have done the trick for now. But I always warn people, I believe that culvert, and Kenny, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that culvert was pretty much designed for that August 9th storm, where we had about 2,200 cubic feet per second of water going underneath, trying to go underneath the highway, and it couldn't do it. So I always warn people that a bigger storm than that could certainly happen. We could have a 3-inch rainfall in 30 to 45 minutes, which could even overwhelm that particular culvert. So please always be weather aware and be aware of, the potential that we have in this area for extremely heavy rain. Now, I don't expect you to read everything on this slide. I broke all the PowerPoint rules here. But this was July 16th of last year, and this is really the one big event that we had last year. And this slide here just is an illustration of how we track how the rain falls on the burn scar, and this is on the 5 rain gauges, which are above you, from Sand Gulch all the way to Williams Canyon. And on that particular day, we were looking at a couple of rain events, and we were tracking how much rain fell during those events. We were also tracking the rainfall rate, and what we found is the rainfall rate is very important. If we get more than a 1/2 inch of rain and it falls within 15 minutes or so, we're going to have some issues with some flooding across the area. But on that particular day, things were pretty much in control across many of the rain gauges and watersheds across the Waldo Canyon burn scar. But the Upper Williams one above Manitou, that was the one that really stuck out to us because we had a rainfall rate of about 2.5 inches per hour with the first dump of rain, and then 3.3 inches the second dump. So we've learned a lot in the last couple of years of what the burn scar can take and what it's going to take to do a flash flood. Now, just 3 days later last year, on July 19th, we had kind of what I call a rogue storm come through. And this storm was an isolated storm, and it was very intense. It lasted for about a half hour or so, and it dumped about a 1/2 inch of rain in 10 minutes. And this was right over Fern Gulch. And I know a lot of you know where Fern Gulch is. It's just up the road a little bit. It's a very small gulch. It's only about 220 acres, and it reacts very quickly when rain is dumped on it. 0.82 of an inch of rain fell in the Fern Gulch area in about 30 minutes. So that's why we had all of the sediment come onto the road on that particular event. So as you can see here, not only does it take a certain amount of rain to cause a flood on the burn scar, it also takes just a rapid rainfall rate to get that effect and to see all that sediment and water coming down on the road. And as we were looking at the event last weekend, we did have a lot of rain. I mean, I live on the west side of Colorado Springs, so it's pretty close to here, just a 10-minute drive. And I've had over 10 inches of rain in 2 weeks. Okay, and that is half of the annual rainfall at my house in 2 weeks. And so that's why everything is flowing up here on the mountainside now, and it's going to be doing that for quite a while. I think the good news is, though, the forecast for this week, the best chance for rain is going to be tomorrow. And then things are going to taper off a little bit later on in the week. And I'm hopeful that the next big system similar to the one that we had last week, is going to pass way, way to the north of us, and that means that the rainfall and the snowfall will be way to the north of us too, talking northern Colorado and Wyoming up in that area. So it looks like we're going to have a little bit of time to dry out. But as I did mention to you, it is very complex. Flooding depends on previous rainfall. Of course, now the soil is completely saturated on the burn scar, and it's just gradually draining off over the next few days. Watershed size and slope, that makes a difference. Rainfall total and rainfall rate, I mentioned that before. And then all the great mitigation work that's been done up on the burn scar in all the different watersheds across Colorado Springs and Ute Pass. And also the condition of the catchment basins, because with this recent rainfall, while there wasn't a lot of flash flooding in the area, but what we did see again was a lot of this sediment coming down and getting into these basins, and these are going to have to be cleaned out, and I'm sure there'll be more talk about that later on tonight. So it is a very complex situation in the area. So we're not going to really change anything what we've done over the past few years as far as how we serve you. The National Weather Service's mission is to protect life and property. That is our basic mission, and we provide the day-to-day forecast, and we also provide the the advisories and the watches and the warnings. And what we generally do when we see a big weather system like we saw last weekend come in, we're going to issue what we call a flash flood watch, and we usually issue that about a day ahead of time, just to get you on watch for the possibility of flooding across the area. We do that when there's a possibility of numerous storms moving into the area, or just a very prolonged rainfall throughout the Pikes Peak region. And again, that typically is issued either a day ahead of time or perhaps a half a day ahead of time just to get you ready. So again, if we see that we're going to get rainfalls of a half inch to an inch, if we're predicting that with rainfall rates around 2 inches, we're going to expect some minor flooding probably across the area. Unless, that were to happen tomorrow with the saturated soil, then, it could be a little bit worse. And rain totals over an inch with rainfall rates of 2 to 5 inches an hour, we're talking a half inch of rain in 10 minutes or 15 minutes. That's quite a quick dump of rain. Then we're going to see some significant flooding, in the area. So we realize that, and we know that, and we keep our eye on that. And one of the things that we've done at our office since the burn scar materialized back in 2012 is we dedicate one person, one forecaster, to look at the radar just for the burn scar. So we've got a 32,000 square mile area all the way from the Continental Divide to Kansas, but it's that important, this burn scar, that we have just one position, one person on that burn scar the entire time that we think it's going to rain on it. So the flash flood warnings. Okay, our goal, and I've mentioned this in the last few years, our goal is to provide minutes of lead time. That's all you're going to get is minutes, and I'll explain why in a minute. Just minutes. So we primarily issue those flash flood warnings using the radar. There are 5 rain gauges up there on the burn scar, but by the time those rain gauges start measuring rain, it's too late. Okay, it's already going to flood in 5 minutes. So we have to anticipate the thunderstorms moving across the area. We have to anticipate, if they're going to change direction, if they're going to intensify, or they're going to get weaker as they're moving across. So it's pretty complex. So primarily we're going to be using the Doppler radar to do that, and it can measure, of course, the amount of rainfall. It estimates that using the radar, and it also estimates the rainfall rate. The radar can do that as well. So that's our modus operandi, I guess. That's the way we operate in the office, is using the radar. And then, as I mentioned, the gauges and all the webcams that have been positioned now up in the burn scar and on the highway, that's just a confirmation to us that something's happening. So we have to anticipate, because of the flashiness of all these small watersheds that are in Ute Pass. So what I always like to do when I come to a meeting like this is I like to, the old saying, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, give him a fishing pole, teach him how to fish, feed him for a lifetime. So what I just wanted to do here is just get on the internet just for a couple of minutes here and go to the National Weather Service's site, where you can kind of go fishing for information, so that you can, as I say, brief yourself from day to day. So our website in the National Weather Service is weather.gov, pretty easy. And you get on weather.gov and you see a national map there. And one other thing that's on weather.gov, which I did want to share with you, is that you might notice I don't have a table back there with brochures on it. And there's a fairly good reason for that, because I like for you to, go online and go fishing for the information that you might want to see here. So on the bottom of this weather.gov page, there's an entire column called Weather Safety. And there's a lot of information on all the different weather hazards all across the country that you can tap into. And at the bottom, there's a web page that has every single brochure that the National Weather Service has in electronic form of all the different types of weather safety and things that you can do to protect your life and to protect your property. So they're all here. There's just an amazing amount of information there. One other thing I wanted to show you too is people ask us all the time, does the National Weather Service have an app, for tablets and smartphones? And the answer is no, we don't have an app. And there's a good reason for that. And if you'd like to talk about that after, I'll tell you. We're part of the federal government, and sometimes we leave those things to other, private concerns and other nonprofits. And I mention that because down here on this weather safety column, there is a clickable for the Red Cross, and we partner, extensively with the Red Cross and all their safety information. And on the Red Cross page here, there is a place where you can actually look at an app that they have, and I'm not going to drill down to that particular page, but I will tell you, if you go on your smartphone, if you go on your tablet, and you search for the Red Cross Emergency app, you can get that. And this is a good way for you to track all the advisories and watches and warnings that we issue in the National Weather Service. It's very, very user-friendly. You can click off the things you don't want to hear about. You can click on the things you do want to know about, the flooding information, and it's going to go right to your tablet and your smartphone. And that's just one great app out there that the American Red Cross has. Another app out there, which I'll quickly show you, is another federal agency that we partner with, FEMA. And FEMA has a website that you might be interested in. So you can check that out. And on the FEMA website, there's also an app that they have where they actually send you our alerts on your tablets or your smartphones or your PCs. So I think I will move on here and show you the May outlook. Okay, we're kind of halfway through May now, and I've been sharing this, and this is also on our website. But the outlook for May, which we are well into now, has a favoring for above normal rainfall across all of the Rocky Mountains and the Great Plains. Okay, big surprise, right? We've had a big storm in the last week. And the weather pattern is still favoring that for the next few weeks. And then the summer outlook, which goes June, July, and August, that's our meteorological summer, is also a big bullseye right over the Rocky Mountains, which makes me very sad. Okay, because we had that kind of situation last year too, where we did have a lot of rain in the area in 2014, but many of the bigger rainstorms that we had last year did not hit the Waldo Canyon burn scar. They just missed it. So again, this year there is a favoring for above normal precipitation across the Rocky Mountains. So I just wanted to point that out to you, that it could be a very rough summer across all of our area as far as rainfall. So rest assured, as I told you before, we take this burn scar super serious. We've been dealing with this now for 3 years, and every time there's a chance for rain, as I mentioned, we are talking with CDOT, we talk with Kenny, we talk with James, we're on the phone with them all the time discussing what's going to be going on. We have one warning forecaster just working the radar for the Waldo Canyon burn scar. So I just wanted to remind you that we do those things. And then as everybody here, and I think Robin's going to mention later on too, you got to know your risk, and I think we all pretty much know our risk now after 3 years, what we're up against with this burn scar, and then make sure you exercise your plan so that you can improve your outcome. So I will be in the back later on to answer any questions, and I appreciate your attention here, and I do encourage you to get on our website and start fishing and briefing yourself and becoming more weather aware as we get into the flood season.
How much rain are we going to get tomorrow?
We're getting questions already. I think tomorrow is probably the greatest chance for rain across the area, and that is a good question because we're not always going to have a flash flood watch out when we do have a threat for flooding across the burn scar, because last year the only time that sediment and water came onto the burn scar was on a day when we had one storm go over the burn scar. So I would just say whenever there's a chance for rain out there, just assume there's going to be a flash flood. I mean, prepare for the worst every day. And as you just said, always, always.
Thank you. And just to let you know, too, we have a Waldo Canyon Regional Recovery Group, and we get together once a month. So just to let you know, there's a lot of collaboration going on between the City of Colorado Springs, El Paso County, the City of Manitou Springs, Colorado Springs Utilities, as well as attendees we have from Teller County, from I know from Green Mountain Falls occasionally attends as well, and of course CDOT, the Forest Service. I don't know that I've left anyone out, but we probably at some point, Coalition for the Upper South Platte and Rocky Mountain Field Institute, as well as Flying W Ranch and the Navigators at Glen Eyrie. So we get together once a month and we get updates from all of the partners as to what's going on and what the progress that we're making and where the shortfalls are that we need to fill those gaps in with. And it's very helpful, and I just appreciate those of you that come to our meetings for the Waldo Canyon Recovery Group. Could you just raise your hand so that people will kind of know who you are? Great. Thank you so much for being here. Now I'm going to call on Kenny Quintana, who's going to talk a little bit about what's going on along Highway 24. A lot of structures, a lot of dollars have been spent. If you look at all the money we've spent, we're probably at about $50 million combined with all of the different resources, and that includes the Forest Service at the state level, all of the folks at CDOT who've put in an enormous amount of time and money, as well as all the local partners. So that's a lot of money that's going into recovery, and I know we're trying to work at the national level to do a better job mitigating that fire before it hits. So remember, don't forget to cut your trees back and create that defensible space, because that's important too. Kenny?
Thank you. Good evening. I wasn't expecting a whole lot of people here tonight. Like last time I spoke at this, we didn't have quite all the people. But I don't have a PowerPoint to present. What I do have is some handouts that are going to be going out that's going to talk about the new protocol. We've been doing this now for 3 years, and I think the majority of the people in this room probably know the aches and pains that we went through these last 3 years trying to provide public safety, as well as trying to keep the road open for the commuters, the tourists, and commodities. So it's been a real balancing act of trying to do that. We've always tried to keep public safety in mind as our first priority. But one thing that I'd like to address or have you guys look at when the handouts are passed out is look at there's a couple of handouts that are showing the post-fire improvements that have been done along Highway 24 and up above from CUSP, El Paso County, CDOT, and there's a lot of others I might forget to mention, but there's been, like Sally said, there's a lot of work that's been done to try to slow down the sediment that keeps coming down on Highway 24. I think there's going to probably be more that might need to be done. We'll have to just kind of wait and see. But if you look at those 2 pages, you can kind of see the different projects that have kind of gone on throughout the last 3 years. With that being said, one thing that CDOT did this year to try to minimize any of the closures that we were doing is we hired a consulting company to do some research of Waldo Canyon area where it was before the fire, the year of the fire, and then after a lot of the mitigation was done. And one of the things that they found out, and this ties into what Tom was saying about the July 19th event, is the burn scar can take a lot of rain before we have any issues. And the biggest thing, like Tom said, is the intensity. The intensity is the biggest key factor for flash flooding onto Highway 24. But what they came up with after doing their study is prior to that July 19th flood, it started, I think, around July 15th, we started receiving rain. And as Tom noted in his presentation, July 16th, we had quite a bit of rain. Well, the ground was saturated, and on that storm on July 19th, where that 0.82 inches of rain came down in 30 minutes, that triggered the mudslide on Highway 24 at Fern Gulch. So after taking all this information in, they suggested that we could cut back on the monitoring and the closures of the highway, which I'm sure many of you are probably happy to hear, as well as I was too, because I spent a lot of time up there monitoring the flood and monitoring Doppler radar. So if you look at another handout, it has a short verbal statements on how we're going to close the highway this year, and then there's also a flow chart. The flow chart's probably the easiest thing to read, but starting May 1st, which you just started, all the way to September 30th, we're going to be monitoring all the rain gauges on a 5-day period. And what Respect had found out that it took up to that 1.3 inches of rain in 5 days before that triggered that mudslide on July 19th. But we wanted to be a little bit more, we were a little more concerned about it happening at 1.3 inches. We cut the threshold at 1 inch. So anytime one of those rain gauges hits that 1 inch of accumulation within a 5-day period, then that's going to enact our monitoring. And what that'll do is that means CDOT will start monitoring the highway, and we're working in conjunction with State Patrol. During the work week, we have crews up there all the time, so it's not that hard to respond. But on a weekend or a holiday, State Patrol has troopers out where we're at home waiting for something to happen. So if that accumulation to 1 inch comes up in that 5-day period, if it's on a weekend or we need to have CSP respond, they'll run up the pass and start monitoring Fern Gulch right there at what we call the pot shop. And and then they'll be at the gates that were installed last year in case we have to close. Now, we're not going to close the highway unless we see sediment or debris coming onto the highway, okay? But CSP will respond until we can get there, CDOT maintenance, and we'll send out a crew of 3 and 1 supervisor, and then we'll start monitoring. If we get a flash flood warning with that ½ inch of rain and the intensity of up to 2 to 3 inches of rain, like Tom was talking about, then that's going to trigger a monitoring situation as well, even if that 5-day isn't at that 1 inch. But that's just a monitoring. That's not going to close the highway. That just means that we're going to be up there monitoring Fern Gulch and have people at the different gate locations to close. Now, in the event that we get that debris coming onto the highway, or we see water coming over at Fern Gulch or anywhere else there that we see that it's going to be a problem, then we're going to go ahead and close the highway. And the protocol is to close the highway at what we call Lower Green Mountain Falls, which is just up the road here, and then at Cave of the Winds. Now, you may be asking, why are we going to close at Cave of the Winds if we're pretty confident with Waldo Canyon? Well, as many of you saw this past few days in the storm, we had a lot of rockfall. And we want to make sure that we have the canyon safe. So what we'll do is we'll close at Lower Green Mountain Falls, over just up the road here. We'll close at Cave of the Winds, and then we'll close at Cascade. And then we will have a supervisor make a sweep of the canyon, make sure that the canyon is safe. If the canyon is safe, then we'll go ahead and move the westbound closure up to Cascade. And then we're going to put a detour into Chipeta Park Road. So even though the road is closed temporarily, if we have an issue at Fern Gulch, we'll try to get that detour put in place so we can keep traffic moving, okay? If for some reason we have the rainstorm like Tom talked about, that is, there's always a possibility here. If you've lived here long enough, The weather changes around here like in a blink of an eye, and we lose Highway 24 completely. Then we'll put in a detour, which we had talked about in the protocol years past, where you'd have to go Highway 24 west to Highway 9, down to Highway US 50, back over to 115, and back to the Colorado Springs. So we're hoping that we don't get that type of rain. That so far the last 3 years, all the rain that we've had, Highway 24 has been able to stay open. We haven't lost Highway 24. And that's what I'm hoping for. One good news that we learned a lot on this last storm that Tom touched a little bit about. We received a little over 4 inches of rain on the burn scar, in the Waldo Canyon area, and we didn't have any issues. We watched and checked Waldo Canyon, and we have that debris net, and you can see that it's on one of the handouts. We did have to clean a little bit of sediment behind the net, but the water never really raised more than maybe not even a foot in Waldo Canyon, or right at a foot. So that basin that's up above Waldo Canyon is working like it should, and that debris net is catching the sediment. So we're pretty confident with that super culvert and the net and the mitigation we've done above there. Our biggest issue that Respect found out that Fern Gulch is still a problem. We did the mitigation there. You guys have seen the sediment pond, and then up above there's another small sediment pond. It was full on Monday. We cleaned it out yesterday, went back up and checked it this morning, and it's completely full of sediment again. So that potential is still there, and that's where our biggest concern is. And that's the reason why we're cutting back on not so much concentration through the canyon, but more at Fern Gulch. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. You probably won't be seeing us very often up on the pass monitoring, and I'm hoping that, I know Tom is kind of predicting a wetter summer, but I can tell you I'm ready for winter already. The snow I can manage a little bit easier, so like Tom, I'll be in the back afterwards, and if you have any questions, I can answer questions in.
We're going to make you come back to the front later on.
Oh, I can come to the front too.
Kenny, could you explain the best way for people to get information
Oh, yes.
about what's going on?
If you, actually on the handout that talks a little bit about the protocol, there is a website that you guys can access. I know it's a long website address, but that is the USGS that's also monitoring the rain gauges. Okay, you can get the same information that we're going to be looking at on that 5-day accumulation on any of those rain gauges. One question that was asked, and I'm sure it's going to be asked today, is what rain gauges are we monitoring, and which one's going to trigger that 1 inch? We don't have a rain gauge, unfortunately, on Fern Gulch, so we're going to use any one of the rain gauges. If the rain gauge hits 1 inch in Waldo Canyon, that's going to trigger the monitoring. If it's triggered from Sand Gulch, then that's going to trigger the monitoring. One of the things that we also did that we're trying to improve on is, I know last year we had some issues with communication, getting the word out to people that the highway was closed, and then when it was reopened, we're trying to work it out to where I only have to make one call. In the years past, I've had a distribution list a mile long, and it kept getting added. It seemed like every day somebody else wanted to get on that distribution list. So we made it to where I'd make one call to our TOC in Golden. They'll get the information out via email, and they'll get the information out through text if what they're working on now. One of the things we found out on this, we closed the highway, as you guys all heard, on Saturday. And one of the things I wanted to make sure that everybody knew, it was not closed due to flooding or rock slide. It was closed due to the heavy hail. Maybe some of you got caught on it, I don't know. But we got, at the recovery meeting yesterday, we found out that not everybody got the word that it was closed and when it was open. So we're still working on the communication part. I contacted our person that's working on the communication with CDOT, and they're working to try to get it out to where people can get it on text, via tweeter. They can tweet that information out. And there's also a website, I don't know if you guys are familiar with cotrip.org. That information will be on there as well.
And I might want to say too that on like cotrip.org, you can sign up for emails as well. So it doesn't hurt to be able to get a text, to be able to get an email, to be able to get your information from multiple sources. Some of the media folks also have special alerts on the different TV stations. So, check and see what will give you the best information. And CDOT is really, I mean, we're all kind of in a learning phase of learning process, and it's getting better. But obviously, it's really a valuable tool that the Colorado Department of Transportation is working hard to get those pieces in place. And I know you can go online to NOAA and get accurate, up-to-date weather maps as well to see where all the weather is going and at what kind of levels you need to be concerned. So our next speaker is Sergeant Jones from the Colorado State Patrol. How are you?
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Sergeant Jones of State Patrol. I'm one of 4 sergeants, road supervisors out of the Colorado Springs office. And I'm sure you're well aware, we patrol El Paso and Teller County. So we do have gaming troopers that are assigned specifically to Teller County. And that's who you usually see working in Ute Pass, Highway 67, Highway 24, and throughout the area. So I ask you please bear with me that kind of got this short notice, but I was asked to get a tidbit of information as far as safety involving operating your automobile when dealing with flood situations. Basically, we would ask that if you ever come across a washed out roadway, a roadway that has very fast moving water, to not even attempt to pass. At that point, you have no clue how deep the water is, and rushing water can very easily pick up a car and take it for a ride, okay? You do not want to put yourself in that situation if at all possible. The next thing would be specifically, let's say you do get caught in that situation. The absolute worst thing you could do is get out of your vehicle, okay? We would kindly ask, and I'm sure your family would appreciate it, if you stay in your vehicle, okay? You might go for a bit of a ride, but you have a much better chance of being uninjured or injured badly by staying in your vehicle, okay? The second you step out of your car, you have no control what happens to you, and you will get washed away. And any other cars, debris, rocks, trees, anything else that may have come down from the scar, that's going to be hitting your body. So we would ask, just please stay in your vehicle, call 911. We're up there, CDOT's up there. El Paso County always responds also. And, we will do our best to get to you and get you safe, okay? Also, specifically, I did want to mention, as far as Ute Pass, I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, travel Ute Pass every day or consistently. And as Kenny mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of rocks coming off into the pass. And that's not something that we're necessarily going to shut down the highway for, or CDOT's going to shut down the highway for. But it's something that I would ask all of you just to be aware and paying attention going through those curves. You may come around a corner and there may be a boulder or lots of smaller rocks in the roadway. And I would just say, watch your speeds, obviously. And just be aware that there could be hazards in the roadway from all the rain and moisture and just loosening up all the rock and that coming down onto the roadway. That's really all I have specifically. Do any of you have questions for us? Go ahead. Well, that's going to be a county issue, I would tell you. I mean, obviously, we don't want to put any kids walking across that, and I'm not really familiar with that area. But I mean, if there is any way for them to go around it, is that what they're doing now, or are they just walking straight through? Okay. Yeah, that's something that I mean, you can bring up to county and see if they have a solution. I mean, they could do a makeshift bridge. There may be a detour. Are you familiar with that, Kenny?
Yes,
Okay.
Actually, that might be a better question for me, CDOT. I know there's probably a lot of here wondering why we have that water going across the frontage road. That culvert that's right there, a cascade, doesn't have a lot of drop to it. And when a lot of sediment comes down off of the ponds, or the pond or the basin that the county made up there, which is definitely helping. But unfortunately, as many of you know, that water started running April 29th, I believe, from that last snowstorm that we had, and I'm assuming it was just from the ground being saturated and then the melting of the snow. On May 2nd, we actually had a crew all weekend long, round the clock, keeping that culvert unplugged because the sediment kept plugging up that culvert. So in years past, when we've had flooding there at Cascade, the water would overwhelm that culvert, and then it would just run down Highway 24 anyway. So we felt it was best if we could just keep the water going across until the water stops. And then we come and try to clean out that frontage road with a loader daily and try to keep that sediment off of the road. I know there's been some concern about the highway or that frontage road washing out. We're paying attention to it, and right now I can tell you it's not. There's a little bit of erosion where the water's coming off the asphalt, but it's not compromising the frontage road yet. With the water, and I don't remember, somebody mentioned that sediment is not as bad as it was. So we're looking at eventually putting it back into that culvert because it will handle the water. What we really need is just, like Tom said, is we just need the moisture to stop, and hopefully that water would quit running through there. Last year, that culvert at that same location with the rains that we had up there, we had to clean it out a couple of times, nothing really serious. And this is the other funny thing too, is normally this flooding doesn't start till July. Here we are in 1st of May, and it's going to be a long summer. But it's definitely something that we're watching. If it does become a safety issue, we will definitely take that into account. And if it's a problem for the children, then we'll look at doing something. I can tell you that our engineering staff is looking at that situation right now because it is a problem, and they're looking to try to come up with a solution to try to fix that.
Okay. Sure. Batteries are your friend.
Thanks. I'm just going to talk a little bit about flood preparedness. We have lots of materials and handouts. You have specific questions in the back that you can pick up because I know all of you have differing levels of need to be prepared and different things to prepare for. Is anybody new here since last September? Anybody moved into the pass? Okay, well, see me afterwards. Okay. There are three basic parts of preparing for flood response as a family, as a business owner in the past, and that's to be aware, to make a plan, and do something. And those are the three parts of it. And this is the real nutshell version, but like I said, we have multiple page handouts in the back if you'd like to see them. The first thing you need to know, as Tom mentioned, is know your risk. Know the risk of flooding. Know your risk, not just the risk for seepage into your basement or for a waterway near your home to overflow, but to know the risks where you work, where your kids go to school, and where you commute and where you're traveling. Be aware of your surroundings, and as Tom mentioned, monitor those weather reports because it's important that you stay abreast of whatever's happening in a developing situation. Okay, that's know your risk. Be aware of what the risk is for you, particularly personally. Make sure kids know and your family members know. The second part is plan. Make a plan. We see one of the biggest neglected things that, does anybody know how to get rid of that? There we go. One of the biggest neglected parts of the plan is communication. Have a plan ahead of time. That's the part of planning ahead, is to not wait till you need it. Have a plan for communication with your friends and family. That includes signing up for weather alerts, whether it's the ones the media provides or some other service. We can't be preferential about any of them. There are lots of places you can get weather alerts or get a weather radio, and make sure that you're paying attention and communicating that way. Make sure you set up a third-person check-in option with your family. There's a good possibility that if there's a flood and you get separated from family members, neither one of you knows how the other one's doing, and there may not be phone service, or the phones may be overwhelmed because everybody's calling. So sometimes it's easier to make a phone call to somebody out of state and tell your family members to call Aunt Martha out of state. And Martha knows everybody's fine, and you can all call Aunt Martha, because sometimes when local cell phones and local phone services are overwhelmed, out-of-state ones aren't. Come up with a couple of different communication plans so that you know how to get in touch with each other in case you get separated as a family. Make plans for sheltering in place if you need to stay in your home, and for moving to higher ground. Have at least 2 different ways to move to higher ground from wherever you are, where you work, where your kids are at school, and where your home is. Have 2 different ways to go to higher ground if you need to. And the rule of thumb is, when in doubt, go up, not out. Don't evacuate unless there has been a specific order to evacuate. So, and that's where the when in doubt part comes in. If you're not sure and there has not been a specific message to the community that this area should evacuate, this area should go to higher ground, then your best bet is to go to higher ground, because choosing to evacuate in that kind of a situation is more risky than just going to higher ground. Make sure that you make evacuation plans as well, and that your family has shared those and know what they are. And make all your what-if plans. What if the road is closed and family members are on different sides of it? What if there is a phone outage? What if your family members are separated? And how about folks with access and functional needs? Do you have neighbors, family members, church members, people that you know who might need help if you needed to evacuate or need help getting to higher ground? And see if you can work them into your plans as well. But don't just make a plan and share it with your family. Do something. After you've made your plan, make sure you share it with people and everybody knows what it is. Practice going to higher ground, especially if you have kids and they're not really sure what you're talking about. If they've done it, they'll be better at it once they've actually walked through it a couple times. Build an emergency kit. What would you do if the road is washed out and you can't get any services or can't get to your home for 3 to 5 days? Most of the emergency plan kit instructions tell you to pack for 3 days, but it could even be longer than that. So make sure you've got an emergency kit that you can grab and go if you need to go. And don't forget to plan for pets in your emergency kit and your emergency evacuation plans, because you may not be back in the house for 3 days. And if your house survives, you don't want to leave your dog in it for 3 days. Take them with you. Make sure that you have supplies for them as well. And take preventive measures. Act now on preventive measures. Whether that, and everybody's situation is different, so I won't get into raising your appliances and things with everybody, but make plans for your home. What if the waters were high, and if you're in a flood risk area, things you can do in your home to mitigate the risk or the damage. Do it now before you need to. The same thing with any sort of property, landscaping, engineering, drainage work you need to do on your property. Do it while you can, before the property's not there to mitigate. Make sure you make preparations. Take action now to secure your documents. Your important documents, put them in a safe place, put copies of them in a safe place, and make sure that they're taken care of ahead of time. And I'm not going to go into great detail about federal flood insurance, but you can find the resources online if you don't have flood insurance, if you haven't looked into it, but definitely look into it if that's not something that you've already been through already. There are more resources. ElPasoCounty.com, the county website, if you go to the Office of Emergency Management page, there are lots of resources on there on the flood recovery and preparation and emergency response. El Paso County Health has got information on how to recover from flood damage or water damage in your home, and how to safely clean up after you get water in your home, even if it's just a small amount of water in your basement, how to safely clean it up so that it's not a health hazard. Tom mentioned weather.gov. CoTrip is also co.gov, and they have a place on Colorado Department of Transportation where you can sign up for text alerts and email messages for roads that you choose. So you can sign up for that.